Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about Divine Ire, one of the skills that got buffed even before we see Transfigured Gems. I'm waiting for them myself, but I thought I would just pick it out and kind of explain why I'm semi-hyped for the skill and how the buff actually materializes in terms of how much damage did the skill even get. I'll first talk about the totem implication and then about the ignite self-cast implication. When it comes to hit-based, the skill is just way too clunky to do it on hit-based. I'll explain that in a little bit. But in terms of damage, it can dish out quite a bit. Talking about clunky though, this skill just got a lot less clunky. So it's get through it together first up. Now, Divine Eye used to have a maximum of 10 stages. So just to show you, if you've never used the skill before, it's basically a channeling skill. Once you start channeling, you get stages. And you see these things around you. You're actually dealing damage against enemies around you. That's kind of called like collecting energy and basically zapping lightning onto those enemies, which also deals low but not insignificant damage. But then at the end, what you have here is this Kamehameha, this big beam where most of your damage is concentrated. So what that meant is mostly you can ignore what's happening here and then you get a huge hit at the end. So whereas most skills kind of flatline, you get a big shock at the end as well. And if you look at the gem, you can actually see that it's a physical skill, which gives it a lot more scaling options. Plus, it already has 50% of Fizz converted to lightning, so all you have to do is put the support gem on. Now, what they did in this patch is they reduced the 20 stages down to 10, which at first sounds mind-blowing and crazy because they also adjusted the damage basically exactly for how much hit damage you get for ramping up to 10 stages instead of ramping up to 20 stages. But to be fair, it already had this effect down here where it says gains an additional stage when hitting a rare or unique enemy. So it was kind of the same time it took you to 20 stages as it now takes you to 10 stages because this line now got removed. So in a sense, not much changed. But everybody who has ever played the skill knows that's not the full story because you're not always near enemies to get that. As well as that, the chance against stuff like normal and magic enemies while you're just clearing was way lower. So usually if you didn't get your damage high enough so the energy could clear magic or normal mobs, you would never see a beam, right? And your totems would have a way higher delay when they're in just normal packs, which is now buffed by quite a bit. So the skill will feel way less clunky while clearing. So, okay, did the skill just gain quality of life? No. There is one more change here that's important, and that is the skill no longer has 50% less damage while channeling. A lot of people are confused with what that means. So the beam at the end is not channeling anymore. That's basically what it means. The beam at the end doesn't get that 50% less damage multiplier. However, the stages here, the energy does, but not anymore. So that means that this stage right here, while you're ramping up to 20, deals double damage. To make this a little bit easier to digest, I made this here real quickly. Don't really look at the time it takes and stuff like that. I just basically want to point out is this is the energy before. It would do very little damage of your total damage, and then you had that big beam at the end, which is still exactly as strong, but your damage ramping up will be way higher initially. And the skill now deals more damage in general, but how much exactly? Let's go over the napkin math. Now, I won't go over everything here because I know most people don't care. But what I did take as a baseline is basically a level 21 gem. No increased damage, no cast speed, no nothing. Just the base gem, which evens out at 283 average physical damage. I took the cast time that was on the skill gem. If you don't know, one stage currently takes 0.22 seconds. Pretty easy, goes up to 2.2 seconds. You gain 10 stages in general, and you have one stage per cast. So now the new gem is pretty easy to calculate. One thing that a lot of people did wrong when I saw them calculate this is it's not 2,400 just because it has 10 stages, because it says stages after the first. So in general, you only gain 9 stages. So yeah, the initial beam deals like 1 or 2% more damage than it did before. Very insignificant, but this is the damage per beam, 6,396. Basically the same, just a little bit different to calc, right? But the damage from the energy, from the ramping up, did change. So what I did here is, in order to calc this, is I just took the time it takes you to get to the beam and added up those damage stages. So we can kind of compare how much damage comes from the beam and how much damage comes from the one before. The damage from the energy doubled because the 50% less is gone. It's not 50% more. It's literally, yeah. The damage is now 2,830 instead of 1,415. That means that the energy is now a total of 30% of your damage. And the end result is that your new damage is 9,225 instead of 7,811, which comes around to out to around 18% more damage. Now, obviously, this is not rounded up. It's kind of like a little bit scuffed, but it should be correct. So now we have 4,193 base damage per second. I just divided this by 2.2, which is the time it takes for a full beam to occur. Now, okay, so we just found out that you deal 18% more damage than before. You probably never played it before, so you don't know what that means. And it now has 4,193 base damage. What does that mean in terms of comparisons? For example, Arc, which now has 6% base crit, which is exactly the same as Divine Ire, so now it's actually fair to compare, with 9 chains, which currently is a level 21, and the quality, don't forget the helmet enchant is gone. Obviously, you can go for other stuff, but that's the same for every skill, right? I didn't put anything into this as well. Comes out to 2,437 damage per second. And don't misunderstand me. I know Arc is way nicer to play if you're self-casting. We're only talking totems right now. We're talking raw damage. So that is quite a bit less. And then Crackling Lance is actually, out of the skills that I compared it to, the most competitive if you take 4 intensity and you have the mastery on the tree, which I think we can assume it's 1 passive point, but it's fine. Still does a little bit less damage, and Crackling Lance is not exactly the most pleasant skill to play. Plus, Crackling Lance doesn't even work for totems. So it's a comparison that only worked on self-cast, but it is still the highest thing I could find in terms of lightning damage. Plus, the comparison is even more in Divine Ire's favor because it is fizz scaling, so it has way better scaling options. And on top of that, you have a way bigger shock at the end, so you can get 40-50% shocks realistically on tougher targets. Now, talking about Ignite, this calc is a lot quicker and easier. So what happened is you get 100% more damage with ailments per stage after the first, which doesn't mean times 10. It means, once again, times 9. So I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but this is where we're at. So it takes 2.2 seconds, once again, to fully ramp up. And then you have 283 base damage. You times 10 that because 900% more damage. And you get to 2,830. Now, is this that great? Well, the obvious comparison would be Wave of Conviction. As a comparison, once again, I took a level 21, and it is 2,083 damage. So at first, you might say, well, yeah, Divine Ire is 36% more damage than Wave of Conviction. Wow. But it is way more clunky, right? Because it's only the beam that you care about then. All the energy before that got buffed is completely useless to an Ignite build. It's way more clunky, so it's way slower. 3 times as long it takes to actually get to that 36% more damage, which on an elementalist you're not exactly super tanky or anything like that, right? And it should be an elementalist because you're fizz scaling, so you can scale fizz's extra cold, fizz's extra fire, fizz's extra chaos and whatever, and it's still going to count for your Ignite. Sure. It also has way worse AoE. Once again, it's only this thin beam at the end, and you're not auto-casting it with totems because totems don't make sense with Ignite. So this might look good on first glance, but I think for Ignite, it's just not very good. But I could eat my words here. Obviously, you could argue, well, I don't have to always charge it up to full, right? Against packs, I can just go to like 7 stages. But at 7 stages, it does around about the same, if not a little bit less damage than Wave of Conviction. And Wave of Conviction also has inbuilt exposure, right? Which is also very nice for Mastermind of Discord. Sure, you could later get that elsewhere, but it's just a question if you want to have this kind of clunky playstyle for that. Why not just play Maw of Mischief? So what's my conclusion for Divine Ire? I think it can actually be a contender to Stormburst and Ball Lightning totems. Especially Stormburst has been meta for quite a time because all these clunky channeling skills are not as clunky on totems because you don't have to press anything. They auto-target. It's just so much nicer. So usually GGG balances around clunkiness. That's why they can't make Cyclone too strong. Otherwise, everybody's going to play Cyclone. Let's just not acknowledge that both skills exist right now, but that's usually the case. So I think damage-wise, it seems very competitive with Stormburst and probably outscale Ball Lightning, although Ball Lightning has some other advantages. It has a way higher shock, which Stormburst can never really reach. So I would be very interested in actually testing this out. I think it's still way too clunky for self-cast. It would have had to get a way bigger buff to ever be viable or have some inbuilt protections, maybe something defensive. And on Ignite, I gotta say, sure, it has 36% more damage than Wave of Conviction. If fully charged, it's just so clunky. It's just a really clunky playstyle. If people wanted a clunky playstyle with a ton of damage, Maw of Mischief does probably like 2 or 3 times the damage of a fully charged Divine Ire, and it was there all along. So I think it would have caught on way quicker, and people are already playing it, so I don't see any niche for Divine Ire for Ignite. But yeah, that's about it. In terms of Divine Ire, I'm actually kind of stoked about maybe exploring some spell totems again. Last time I played it, we didn't really have a 4th note on Hierophant, and now we have Arcane Blessing with a 20% more damage. Actually, 24% more damage multiplier with the Arcane Surge effect. So I'd be very interested to revisit that again. And Spell Totems are really nice to maybe try out some of the new skill gems. I could just throw them in, just try them out. So I'm still thinking about what I want to league start myself. I just wanted to throw this out there because I saw some opinions on Divine Ire on Reddit. And yeah, that's about it. Since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.